Hey everybody, it's the Ambassador coming at you with a brand new truck video. And I hope you all can hear me over the rain. It's a wonderful, dreary winter's day here in the non-sunny state of Indiana. And as I said, this is going to be a truck video, and we're going to be continuing our 1980s movie review series, or as I'm going to start calling it, The World Before It Went Woke. So let me all know down in the comments what you think of this new title. I think it sounds pretty cool, but if y'all don't like it, we'll see how this goes. But we're going to do just a quick review and everything of an old 1980s classic that I think y'all, some of y'all may have seen, some of y'all may not be aware of. But we're going to be talking about Flash Gordon. And this movie came out in the 1980s. Obviously, it came out in 1980, around the same time I think that Empire Strikes Back did. And for those of you who aren't aware, this movie is kind of a homage to the old Flash Gordon black and white movie serials from like the 1930s and 1940s. And it's actually one of the series that inspired George Lucas to do his Star Wars movies in the style in which he did, which is doing them as episodic. But the cool thing about this Flash Gordon movie is it is extremely cheesy. The special effects for the time aren't bad or anything, but at the same time they're not the best. But I will say the soundtrack, which is done by the great rock band Queen, is honestly one of the best and most coolest parts of the movie. There are some good actors in this and everything. One is Max von Sydow, who plays the villain Ming the Merciless. For those of you who might remember Max von Sydow, he played Lord Zanteca in Force Awakens. He also has had several prominent roles throughout his career. He played Father Merrin in the first Exorcist movie. He also played... oh, goodness. Oh, he played Dr. Kynes in the 1983 or 1984 adaptation of the movie Dune, by the adapted from the book by Frank Herbert. And we might do a review on that and everything here in the next few days or so. And there's one other actor and everything that I want to make note of and everything, because up until this point and everything, he had done some smaller roles, and after this, he did some Shakespearean roles. He actually played the ghost of Hamlet in Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of the movie Hamlet from the 1990s. And that's Brian Blessed. And he actually plays Voltan, who's the leader of the Hawk people. Oh, and there's one other guy and everything. He actually was one of the 90s Bond guys, and that's Timothy Dalton. I'm trying to remember the name of Timothy Dalton's character, but I can't off the top of my head. But I think honestly the neat thing about this movie, as I said, is it is extremely cheesy at parts, or honestly all the way. It is cheesy from beginning to end. The special effects, they're not the greatest, but at the same time, it is a very enjoyable movie. It does give you a good idea of what the Flash Gordon movie serials were like, not to mention the cartoons and the books that were done with the series. And Sam Jones plays the title role of Flash Gordon. And actually, this version of Flash Gordon, if I remember correctly from the 1940s and 30s serials and some of the other media that were done for Flash Gordon, he wasn't a football player per se. He was kind of an adventurer. Think along the lines, not so much on the archaeological side, but think like Lara Croft or Nathan Drake or something along those lines. And maybe just a little bit of Indiana Jones too. But in this version, Flash Gordon is actually a football player. And he gets caught up in everything in this wild, off-the-wall, wacky adventure and everything out in space. And you open with the movie and everything with Max von Sydow's character, the villain Ming, and one of his lieutenants, Kaleidos. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. and everything. They're talking about doing all this weird, wacky, okay, not weird and wacky, but this very destructive stuff to Earth, to our world, because they're way off in space, and they've got this device that can create all sorts of natural disasters and whatever. And Ming decides he's going to use the Earth as his plaything, everything until he gets bored with it and ends up destroying it. And you have this one scientist and everything, I think his name was Zarkov, who has figured out what exactly is going on with the world. And it snowballs and everything. Flash and this one girl and everything, her name's Dale Arden and everything, she's a sports agent. And they get caught up in this whole scheme with Zarkov and everything to go confront whatever force is slowly destroying the Earth. And they end up getting teleported to this other galaxy where Ming the Merciless rules. And he's got all these other planets and everything, or kingdoms, under his control. And Brian Blessed plays the king of the Hawk people and of Hawk World. And then Timothy Dalton's character plays the ruler of another realm of, I think it's called the realm of Mongo, and everything is the whole kingdom that Ming the Merciless rules over. And eventually you have Flash and Dale and Dr. Zarkov confront Ming, and it just goes completely 90 miles an hour off in one direction, and it just turns into this wild, wacky adventure, and it's very much in the vein of the old Flash Gordon serials. Excuse me, a little bit of gas, I just had lunch. But the wonderful thing about this movie is, as I've said a couple of times already, it does not take itself too seriously, because it is very campy, it is very cheesy, but it honestly is a whole lot of fun. It is it's a fun, entertaining movie, and I honestly think it was one of those movies that was sparked, the idea to make it was sparked by the success of Empire Strikes Back. I'd have to go back and double check and see when Flash Gordon was made in comparison to, or when it was released in comparison to when Empire Strikes Back was released. But honestly, the effects and the costumes and everything are very stylized, and they're honestly hyper realistic of what was done in the old Flash Gordon comics and the serials and the books and everything that were done. And they're taken just to the edge of unbelievability, but it still looks cool. And I will say the women's costumes are a little skimpy. Now, granted, you don't see anything. I think this movie was rated PG or PG-13, probably somewhere along those lines. But other than that, the movie itself is a lot of fun. There's a lot of adventures. There's a lot of campiness. Nothing is taken too much seriously. It's very tongue-in-cheek, in a manner of speaking. But if you have not had an opportunity to watch this movie, I highly recommend it. Everything. I actually found a copy of it just by sheer luck and everything at one of the secondhand movie store places I go to near where I live. And I found this movie, I think like maybe 2.5 years, well, yeah, maybe a year and a half or so ago. I was like, holy crap. I just hit the mother lode. But I think that just to kind of tie this in with this new angle I'm going to take on my movie series and anything, The World Before It Went Woke. This version of Flash Gordon, this iteration of Flash Gordon, I don't think would have been carried off. Now, the only thing I think would be better anything in comparison to when it was released in the 80s is maybe that the special effects were better, maybe the models were better. But I don't think this movie would be particularly well received by the woke. But again, why do we really care what the woke thinks? Because they'll say, well, the women are being hypersexualized because they're wearing these skimpy costumes, and the guys are being too manly, and they're not being woke enough, they're not being sensitive enough, and all this other nonsense. And I know I sound a little bit like Hank Hill just now. But, yeah, honestly, Flash Gordon it would not have been well received by the woke or the SJWs or whatever. But I think honestly, I think for everybody else in American society, maybe in world society, I think it would still be very well received if a redo was done of it, or just now, if it was done as the way it is now. But honestly, I think for me and everything, because I had seen this movie a lot on TV when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it. And it was one of those movies that my parents and everything, and my grandmother, when she would babysit me, or when she helped take care of me after my dad passed, she'd be like, "Yeah, you can watch this. This is a good clean. It's relatively clean. There's no profanity. There's no real bloody gore type of stuff in the movie." And I'll tell y'all a funny story in relation to this movie. When my mom and dad had just first started dating, or actually it was a little while after they had they had just started dating. And drive-ins were still a popular thing back in those days. This is like the mid to late 70s. And I think this was like the second or third date my mom and dad went on and everything at the time. And my dad was like, "You want to go see a movie?" And she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Is there anything good playing at the drive-in?" He's like, "Well, let's find out." And they looked up in the movie listing and everything in the newspaper, and yeah, there were a couple good movies and everything. And one of them was, well, I'll come to that in a minute. They get to the movie theater, they buy their tickets and everything, and they figure they're going to go see Flash Gordon. Well, the funny thing is, it was a science fiction version, or it was a version of Flash Gordon, but with one tiny little difference. It wasn't Flash Gordon. It was Flesh Gordon. Back in the 70s, they still would release like these soft-core, very tame comparison to what you have nowadays, adult movies, let's just put it that way. And it wasn't anything terribly obscene. I don't think there was any full frontal. I never asked. Did not want to know. But the funny thing was, my father was extremely apologetic and everything, because him and my mom had just started dating, as I mentioned, and he was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know." He's like, "I didn't know. I'm so sorry. We can leave." And my mom was like, "No, we paid for our tickets. We're both adults here. We're gonna sit down and watch this." But the reason was, my mom wanted to see just how sincere, if he was just putting on an act, or if he was genuinely sincere and apologetic about it. And he was and everything, obviously, or they wouldn't have gotten married. But my mom told me that story and everything once I got old enough to know it and everything, obviously. But the problem was, my dad, much like me, much like my dad and everything, he wore glasses. And back in those days, the marquees at movie theaters and at drive-ins weren't always the easiest to read. And it would be easy to mistake an A for an E. Or rather, in this case, an E for an A. Because you look at it and you go, "Oh, it's Flash Gordon. Okay, this is good. We're going to go see the movie we're wanting to pay for." And it turns out it's not exactly the movie we wanted to go see that we paid for. But that all being said, guys, if you are new to my channel, welcome. I do these truck videos periodically. It's kind of an homage to Jeremy at Geeks and Gamers with his car videos and everything, but I don't have a car, I have a truck. So, if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like, giving it a share. If you have any comments down below and everything that you want to share with me, by all means, comment below. You can reach me on Twitter at Rogue5778. And until next time, my friends, this is the Ambassador, signing off.